Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ashley Thurston, and I am the Communications Director for Represent Women. We're so excited to share the incredible work Represent Women is doing to build women's political power. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of the dedicated donors who have joined us today. Your support is instrumental in making our mission a reality. During the call, we'll be posting valuable links to our work in the chat, so be sure to grab them for future reference. I'm thrilled to introduce Cynthia Ritchie Terrell, Represent Women's founder and executive director, who will give you a brief overview of our organization.
Great. Thank you so much for being on our call today, everyone. And thanks so much to our fabulous communications director, Ashley, for planning and moderating this webinar and bringing just so much passion and expertise to this work. I really appreciate it. I'm so impressed with the entire team at Represent Women, and I'm so glad that you're going to have a chance to hear from them today. But before I turn it over to my amazing colleagues, I thought I'd offer you a brief trip down memory lane for those attendees who may be new to Represent Women's mission and work. Represent Women began as a project of Fair Vote in 2013. That same year, we produced our first Gender Parity Index report and held a briefing on our work that was covered by C-SPAN, featuring notable women leaders like Celinda Lake, Marie Wilson, and Laura Liswood. Our focus in those early years is essentially the same as it is now: to really understand the structural barriers that women face in politics as candidates and as elected officials, and figure out the best practices, the policy solutions to address those barriers that women face. Our commitment to systems that you'll hear more about today is grounded in extensive research on the barriers that women face when running for office and the interventions that create more opportunities for women to run, to win, to serve, and to lead. Our belief in the power of systems change is grounded really in the experience of how change has happened in the United States over the last 100 years. We have the example of suffrage, which was obviously a systems change. Title IX changed the landscape for American education and athletics for girls, obviously a systems change. The Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, which we're celebrating anniversaries of, were incredibly important and impactful examples of policy solutions and system strategies to address the inequity that huge parts of our population faced. And of course, the Americans with Disability Act was much the same. It addressed the barriers, structural barriers, that many Americans, believe like 35% of Americans have some sort of a disability or another faced while just running about their everyday lives. So we see those examples as really important parts of the strategy to change structural inequity in our country. And the policies that we are promoting are enduring, and they're viable, they're scalable, and they're truly transformative. In the last 5 years, we secured enough funding, I'm happy to report, to grow our team from just 2 members to now our flourishing team of colleagues, our team of sisters, if you will. We engaged in a strategic planning process that led us to 3 key levers of change: to build knowledge. You're going to hear a lot about that today from our fabulous research team. To help set the agenda, that's where the communications team comes in, to really figure out the best messaging, to equip people with the frame and the narrative and the analysis that they need. And then to also engage with partners, and you're going to hear from some terrific partners today, partnership team members, to make policy innovations a reality. As we face what is indeed the most consequential election of our lifetimes, it's time for women from all walks of life to have a seat at the table where decisions are being made. I'm now so glad to turn it over to the team, and I really look forward to hearing your questions and suggestions for us in the second half of the program. Thanks again, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Our partnerships department is the engine of our outreach and coalition building efforts. They work tirelessly to forge strategic relationships and fuel the systems reform movement with our data and resources. I'm pleased to introduce Katie Usales, our partnerships director, who will share more about our partnerships team and our work on RCV ballot measures. Take it away, Katie.
Thank you, Ashley. Hey, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your support of what we do here at Represent Women. As Ashley said, I'm Katie Usalis. I lead the partnerships team, and our team has the honor of taking all of that rich and valuable evidence from our research team and getting it into the hands of folks who can really make change happen. So we equip RCB campaigns in a variety of ways. It depends on the needs of the campaign. It also depends on the needs of the partner. But I'll share three main ways with you now. So first, we provide tools and resources. Here are two examples of resources that we provide for campaigns. On the left, you'll see a sample of a women validator quote, and these are always in high demand because surrogates for campaigns are so valuable. And depending on the state and the locality, hearing from women is often essential to the success of a campaign. We also provide endorsements, the one that you see on the right. This was one that we collaborated with the Michigan ballot measure campaign from last year to provide endorsements for different ballot measures or legislative measures. And we also create many other state or campaign specific materials. We know that resources are thin on the ground. Not everyone has access to graphics teams. Not everyone has access to Mary Peltola, so we are happy to provide that. The next thing that we provide is woman power. This is a big contribution that we make to the systems reform movement by bringing influential women and women's organizations into the fold. So women make up, as you know, women make up over half the population in the United States, and women get things done. So we know that if we want reforms like ranked choice voting to pass and stay in place for the long term, not get repealed, not get, tossed out, women need to at least be at the table, if not leading the charge. So we leverage our networks and our connections to bring women in. And you can see some examples on this slide. We have our Democracy Solution Summit, which is a virtual event we host every year, the only democracy summit to feature all women voices. And you can see this incredibly impressive lineup of women all there to speak together about the need for ranked choice voting and the need for systems reform. The picture below that is of our women mayors gathering. We have a group of 5 women mayors there, all of whom got together to learn more and talk about things like ranked choice voting, including 2 mayors from Oregon, one from Bend, Oregon in this photo where we know there's an active campaign for ranked choice voting. And then the last photo is of secretaries of state, again, all getting together to talk about the need for reform like ranked choice voting and from their perspective as women election officials, what it takes to make that happen and why they support that. We have Sarah Copeland Hanzas from Vermont, Secretary Maggie Toulouse-Oliver from New Mexico, also Shanna Bellows from Maine, and Jenna Griswold from Colorado there with Cynthia, who you just met. And last but not least, we provide expert testimony. So wherever the representation message is salient to a campaign, we want to make sure that the fact that ranked choice voting means more women run and win is on the record. So we have provided countless expert testimonies at public hearings, which both live and written, and we've also spoken to a range of state and local level steering committees or task forces on ranked choice voting. So we can see on the left, actually, Victoria, my colleague, and I just spoke last week or maybe the week before that to the Connecticut Governor's Task Force on Ranked Choice Voting, and this lovely write-up was with our data featured there. We got to see that in the paper the next day, so that was exciting. And then on the right is just one example of a written testimony for this one was for legislation in Minnesota, and we have done this for almost every state where there has been where they've accepted written testimony for RCV legislation. So that's a quick summary of what we do for RCV campaigns in states, and I will now pass it back to Ashley or maybe directly to my colleague, Victoria.
Yep, to Tori.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Ashley. So good to see everybody. My name is Victoria Pelletier, and I am the National Partnerships Manager with Represent Women. Also an elected official here in Portland, Maine, serving on the Portland, Maine City Council. So nice to be here with my colleagues and talk about some of Represent Women's incredible programs. And the first one that I'm going to start with is the Women's Power Collaborative. And so this member platform is the only national level collaborative of its kind that combines women's representation advocates with democracy reform advocates who share the same goal of a healthier and more representative democracy. And we have over 150 members that represent about 90 different organizations. And the membership itself is really diverse. So we have democracy reform experts, we have candidate training organizations, and we have academics, and we have elected and appointed officials, and so many others as part of this platform. And we really wanted this to be a collaborative space for the women's representation movement. And we wanted all of our members to be able to have a central location where they could connect and strategize and talk to one another. And we also really wanted this to be, again, a central location for the research that's related to women's representation. So whether members are coming on to look for candidate training curriculums or research related to democracy reform efforts, they can actually come onto the Women's Power Collaborative and freely download this information to share with their network so that we can increase efficiency and not reinvent the wheel. And in addition to the collaborative aspect, we also wanted to provide additional benefits to our members so that we can help them advance their goals as it relates to women's representation. So we organize a couple of programming. We have monthly lunch and learns on various topics that are related to women's representation that are facilitated by members, and these serve as educational opportunities. Emerge is presenting next week, so we're really excited for that. And then the second thing that we offer are our monthly regional group meetings. And so this allows members to get to know one another, to strategize together on local ballot measures, just to get to meet their neighbors, have organize on research releases and events, and again, just allow them a space to really be able to connect and collaborate where they otherwise maybe wouldn't be able to meet other individuals and organizations in their city and in their state who are working towards the shared goal of women's representation. So we have been doing that full speed ahead since January, every single month, and we are really excited for what's to come. Currently, we are working with a design team on a rebrand of the actual platform, so we're really excited to see what opportunities we have to continue to grow our membership now that we've seen so much success, but are really excited again to continue to grow our presence and provide that programming to our members. So that's a little bit about the Women's Power Collaborative. And then I want to move in to the second resource, which is also one of a kind that I want to highlight, which is the Women Experts in Democracy Directory, or the WEDD. So this resource is also one of a kind. Again, it is the only directory that features women identifying experts in democracy reform and women's representation. So the women in this directory are leaders in their field, and their expertise ranges from candidate training to election security, to campaign finance, to ranked choice voting, and so much more. And this directory, again, is public. And so you can filter it by location, you can filter it by language, you can filter it by area of expertise, and so much more. So really in the spirit of having more women's voices at the table in panels and in discussions, we offer the Women Experts in Democracy Directory, and it is filled with experts who live across the United States and abroad. I think collectively we have 11 languages that are represented. So it's a really great resource that we try to share far and wide to ensure that women's voices are part of all conversations as it relates to representation, and so that we can have more of them at the table sharing their expertise in every single conversation. And then the last program that I'm really excited to talk about is our Seneca Falls 2024 project. So we began this project in March, and we wanted it to be a rebrand of the original Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, where hundreds of women gathered to demand equality, including the women's right to vote. And as we all know, it was not super intersectional back in 1848. So our team thought it would be really powerful to release our own 2024 Declaration of Sentiments, highlighting the need for women's representation at all levels of government, especially the presidency, and then pair it with a virtual town hall closer to the election. So we're really, really excited for that to release and for us all to continue to have conversations about the need for women's representation. We are in the process of finalizing the Declaration of Sentiments, which was going to be an electronic version. So we are going full speed ahead into 2024. It is going to be an electronic version that is uploaded. Our partners will actually be able to sign on to it. They will be able to add their organizational logo. And again, this is an effort to build momentum around the election. And as we all know, a lot has changed since March as it relates to the presidential election. So while this Seneca Falls statement isn't going to be an endorsement of one candidate over the other, this is going to be a national call for the need for systems change so that more women have the opportunity to run for office and to win. So super excited to be able to share that Seneca Falls statement, our declaration of sentiment. Shout out to our communications director, Ashley, for putting that statement together. We can't wait to share it with all of you and really build momentum. And as we get closer to November, we will share details about a virtual town hall. And it's really going to be a discussion of what are the women saying as it relates to the presidency? How can we all gather and have our voices amplified? How can we talk about the need for systems change? And so we're really, really excited for that. So more details to come. But again, just a huge thank you to all of you for being here. Super proud and happy to be part of the Represent Women team. And those are a few of our incredible programs. So I will kick it back over to Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tori. And I will piggyback and say we are definitely excited for all that we have to come this fall. Now, our research department is the backbone of Represent Women. They provide data-driven insights to inform our strategies. Their work is essential to our success. I'm excited to introduce Courtney Lemondola, our research director, who will begin sharing more about our research. Take it away, Courtney.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So I can kick things off by saying that the core of our work at Represent Women is research and analysis, particularly around the systems that shape opportunities for women in politics. But before we can pinpoint specific barriers and solutions, we need to know how well women are represented across the United States. So with that, we can kick over to the next slide. So thanks to our partners at Rutgers, data on women's representation in all 50 states is readily available. But when it comes time to identify which states have shown the most and least progress towards parity, the answer isn't always obvious when you look at the numbers. Your first instinct might be to look at women's representation in Congress, where New Hampshire would come in first, with 75% of its congressional seats going to women, and 8 states tying in last place because they all have no women in Congress. But this isn't necessarily fair to states with larger congressional delegations, such as California, which would then appear to underperform despite having 17 women in office. So let's set Congress aside and look at state legislatures, where there are more seats available for women to win in all states. By this measure, Nevada would come in first, with women surpassing parity, while West Virginia would come in last. But even this isn't a perfect approach because you end up highlighting states that do relatively well in state legislatures, but still have no women in Congress and vice versa. So this takes us over to our signature research. Onto the next slide, the Gender Parity Index. So our product, the Gender Parity Index, or the GPI for short, is an annual study of women's representation at the national, state, and local levels of government, in which each state receives a weighted score, rank, and letter grade. We first launched the Gender Parity Index 11 years ago, and we used it as a tool to measure progress towards gender parity in government over time. The methodology behind the Gender Parity Index is as follows. States earn points according to the number of women in elected office, up to 30 points for women in Congress, 30 for statewide elected executives, another 30 for women in state legislatures, and up to 10 points for local executive officials, think mayors and county executives. In total, states can earn up to 100 points if women were to hold every elected office. Based on these scores, we then assign letter grades according to how close women are to achieving parity, which would be 50 out of 100. Otherwise, we assign an A grade. Let's kick it over to the next slide and see how we did this year. So newly released as of yesterday is our 2024 Gender Parity Index, in which 2 states earned an A grade for the second year in a row, Oregon and Maine. 12 states have earned a B, 10 a C, and 26 states have earned a D. And for the first time ever this year, no state has failed. So let's see how this is really shaped up over time, because the benefit of doing this report every year is we can really see what's changed, what stayed the same, and start to draw some conclusions. Next slide. 10 years ago, no state earned an A and 40 states earned either Ds, and of those 40, 8 of them failed. Following the record-breaking election cycles in 2018, 2020, and 2022, more women entered office, which brought up their state scores and grades. but that progress hasn't been shared evenly across the United States, as you can see looking at these maps, where many states in the middle have sort of hovered around the same letter grades. So this brings us into the analysis that we do based on the foundational research of the Gender Parity Index. Let's kick it over to the next slide. Some of our key findings have been that progress is nonlinear. Despite being the first state to achieve an A back in 2015, New Hampshire now earns a B and ranks 11th in the 2024 Gender Parity Index. So this is where our work begins, so that we can better understand the barriers and opportunities for making sustainable progress towards parity. I'll now pass the mic over to my colleague, Steph Scaglia, who will talk about the change that we need to ensure that more women can serve in the long term.
Thanks, Court. So as we've said, a key component of Represent Women's research is not just getting women in office, but sustaining that representation as well, our serve bucket. Through both our research and conversations with ally organizations and elected officials, one of the serve barriers that became really clear to us was legislative pay. Legislative pay can vary drastically from state to state. For example, in New York, they get paid $142,000 annually, while New Mexico's legislators are virtually unpaid. In our initial survey of existing research on legislative pay and women's representation, we found the potential of compensation commissions, which study, make recommendations, and sometimes set legislative salaries, to have largely been overlooked. So this leads us to salaries of state, modernizing state legislatures through compensation commissions, and how to address this research gap. Next slide, please. Our report first presents existing research on compensation, as well as how women legislators are impacted by pay. We then move to look at the dominant methods of increasing pay, legislature citizens vote, such as ballot measure, compensation commissions, or external factors, such as COLA increases or being tied to other state salaries. We then narrow in on compensation commissions, including their powers, where they're used, and how they can be established. We then move to 3 state case studies, which I'll present on the next slide, and we conclude with our key takeaways, which I will also go over. So moving to our 3 case studies, we picked these 3 states because they're all quite different from one another. Pennsylvania has high pay, with legislators making 6 figures. New Mexico's legislators don't make anything, as I said earlier, and in Kansas, legislators make $20,000, but soon to be $40,000 because they were able to establish a compensation commission. So some lessons learned from these states include that trust is needed to have a healthy political atmosphere and for voters to believe their legislators have their best interests at heart. Building healthy practices, such as establishing compensation commissions around salaries, can help create this trust. Next, we have that voter education is crucial. According to polling done from Common Cause New Mexico, the majority of citizens in New Mexico actually think their legislators are paid, and a plurality think that their legislators make over $75,000, creating a huge barrier to increasing pay and passing a bill to increase pay. A compensation commission would remove the problem from the hands of the legislators and the voters. And for Kansas, we saw that they were able to raise pay because recommendations go into effect automatically. This highlights the importance of how commissions are set up. So to sum up, what have we learned? State legislator compensation impacts who serves in office and for how long. Commission power and authority are pivotal in determining effectiveness. And voter education is critical to establishing and sustaining a commission. But this research also left us with more questions than answers. Our continued serve work will examine how commissions may work alongside other benefits, such as retirement packages and per diem rates, and we plan to examine how pay ought to be structured in full-time versus part-time legislatures, and examine rules regarding dual employment for legislators, and more. In order to answer these questions, we hope to work directly with elected women as well as with our partners that are doing related work. I'll now pass it over to my colleague Marv to talk about our research on the barriers Black women face in politics.
Thanks, Steph. Hi, everyone. My name is Marvelous Maeze, and I'm a research associate at Represent Women. Within the electoral reform space, statistics are reported annually, showing that despite constituting 8% of the population, Black women are currently and have historically always been underrepresented at all levels of government. However, very little data exists to examine why that is and how to fix it. So this year, Represent Women endeavored to answer those two critical questions. In February, we launched a brief entitled Breaking Barriers for Black Women Candidates. It is the first installment in a new series that outlines the systems level and candidate level factors impacting Black women's political participation and representation in U.S. politics. It identifies three main barriers that Black women face when running for office: political party recruitment, traditional funding practices, and plurality voting. Next slide, please. Our research found that solutions that would mitigate the current issues, 5 main ones. First, we need early investments by political parties to advance Black women in politics. This involves setting candidate recruitment targets and quotas and implementing networking and mentorship initiatives in partnership with candidate organizations. Second, donors should adopt gender and race balance funding measures to fund Black women's campaigns equitably. PACs and donors can model these initiatives after those already existing in other industries. Next, public financing programs empower Black women candidates to run competitive campaigns by amplifying small dollar donations and limiting the impact of big money. Fourth, ranked choice voting creates opportunities for Black women candidates by eliminating split votes and enabling non-status quo candidates. Last, but certainly not least, we have proportional ranked choice voting, which enhances these opportunities by allowing communities to elect candidates in proportion to their percentage of the population. With these 5 things, we can truly create change for Black women in politics. So to celebrate the release of the brief and celebrate its early impact and widespread success, we held an event in May that featured 2 roundtable discussions with Black women who have been elected to serve in public office, as well as those advancing Black women's representation at the grassroots level. We have several prospective projects on the horizon. The first of which is an external deliverable that examines violence, harassment, and online abuse against Black women in politics. It will delve into the bipartisan role that political parties play in ensuring safety and security for Black women candidates and elected office holders, and study how we can hold social media companies accountable to their due diligence practices. We soft launched this research with a published op-ed that our founder, Cynthia, and I co-authored about the recent racist graffiti and vandalism on Senate candidate Angela Alsobrooks' campaign sign, and how it is a reminder of the threats Black women in politics face every day. We have 4 other touch points that we are simultaneously looking into. One examines the socioeconomic background of Black women in from low-income beginnings and its impact on political candidacy fees and self-funding prospects. The next one analyzes the experiences of Black women in U.S. politics who lost their elections. Another aims to understand the flow of political party funding and its impact on Black women in politics across municipalities to federal levels. We are also investigating political parties' placement of Black women candidates in elections to understand and answer criticism that they may be attempting to sabotage them through their strategic placements of them in unwinnable races. Thank you for listening. Now I will pass it on to my esteemed colleague, Fatma Taufik, to discuss Represent Women's research on international elections and voting systems.
Thank you, Marv. Hello, my name is Fatma Tawfi. I'm Represent Women International Research Manager, and I will be going through what we do in the international department very quickly. We study women's political representation globally to identify the best practices for electing more women. This includes voting system, gender quota, structural solution, and barriers that prevent women from entering and participating in politics. We do that through 2 types of research. Next slide, please. First, our regional briefs, where we study women and we study and compare women representation across different nations and different regions. And we have an upcoming research in October about women representation in the European Union. Second thing that we do is our independent study, where we focus on a specific country or topic. And we also have an upcoming research this August on gender equality in unrecognized states. Through our research, we found that the best systematic reform to increase women representation internationally was a combination between proportional representation and gender quotas, as we found that the 72 countries that have both of those systematic reforms, women average as 32% compared to 17% where the country have first past the post voting system. The second thing that we do focus on in the international department is data collection and availability, as we track and monitor data on women representation around the world monthly in tune with the Interparliamentary Union, and we share it and make it available through our interactive dashboards, whether it's the international, regional, the OECD country, or the G20 countries. Next slide, please. Next, we do election monitoring. We monitor international election each month to see how women will fare and analyze the results to identify the reasons behind an increase or decrease in women representation in the country through our op-eds. For example, we just had our op-ed on the latest Mexican election while cooperating with Georgina de la Fuente, who were a senior advisor for the National Electoral Commission in Mexico. The case of Mexico showcased the effects of combining proportional representation and gender quota, as Mexico changed its voting system in 1991, which led to the doubling of the percentage of women representation in the parliament, and later the series of gender quota laws that they introduced from 2002 to the gender parity mandate in 2014, that eventually led to women acquiring 50% of the public offices and paved the way for Mexico to have its first women president this year. We also wrote an op-ed on the Indian election that happened the last couple of months while cooperating with Akhil, who was a researcher at the Center of Gender and Politics in India. Also, we're currently working on an op-ed on the Rwandan elections. Lastly, we do networking and interviews. We work on networking with gender advocates from all across the world, just like we did writing the op-eds on Mexico and India's op-ed and India. We also launched the International Election Experts Interview Series, as we interviewed Mary Robinson, who is Ireland's first women president, and we also interviewed Georgina de la Fuente and Jennifer Pescopo and Catherine Rees on the Mexican elections. And that was a quick overview of our work, and thank you, and I will pass it back to Ashley.
Thank you so much, Fatma, and thank you, research team, for sharing all of the great things that we're doing here at Represent Women in our amazing research. I now want to introduce Carla Bernal from Pivotal Ventures to share more about their support for Represent Women.
Thank you, Ashley, and hello, everyone. I get the fun job. I get to talk about why we support Represent Women and all the incredible work that they do. I am Carla Bernal again. I'm with the Women's Political Power team at Pivotal Ventures, and I'm calling in from the Bay Area, California. If we have some West Coasters here, please let me know. I'm really excited to share why we've supported Represent Women at the outset of our strategy, because they have been central to our long-term work. But first, maybe just a background for those who aren't familiar. Pivotal Ventures is a social impact company launched by our founder, Melinda French Gates, in 2015. We work on a set of strategies primarily focused on building women's power and influence in the US, and then most recently, we're also working globally. At the heart of our women's political power strategy is really the idea that we can't have a thriving, healthy, active democracy if we don't have equal representation. And if we don't have a healthy, thriving, active democracy where people can vote and trust the results, run for office and serve safely, it's going to be really hard to move the issues that we care about. So in the short term, when we launched a strategy, our electoral strategy, we were focused on getting more women elected in office, especially in state legislatures, to make sure that they have the support to govern once they are in office. But as we were building the strategy, we realized that a pipeline and an electoral strategy alone would be insufficient. Recruiting, training, electing women in a system that wasn't built for them isn't going to work. We need to address the long-term structural barriers that make it harder for women to run and serve in office. And that's why we decided to invest really early in Represent Women, because they are doing exactly that. They are thinking about long-term change, and they're thinking about all the ways we need to address the structural barriers that will make it easier for women to run, serve, and defend our democracy, especially in this election cycle. I don't have to talk at length about the robust research they already have, the data, the tool set, the messaging, the best practices. They are working up and down all these incredible issues to make sure that we are both marrying the space of women's representation and pro-democracy reform. And they are one of the only ones doing this kind of work. Above all, and central to us here at Pivotal Ventures, is that they champion women's leadership. You saw the shout out to the Women's Democracy Expert directory that they have dropped in the chat here, and they're doing this work. They're advancing pro-democracy reform work in a way that I haven't seen in other organizations because they are prioritizing a very strong gender and racial lens. I am happy to talk to other funders here in the room with us. If you don't already support them, please reach out to me. I highly recommend their work. They have been incredible thought partners to us at Pivotal Ventures, and I hope that they will also be thought partners to you all. I'll pass it over to you, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Carla, and thank you so much for you all's support. I just want to give a quick shout out because we are now going to move back to Cynthia for her to answer any questions that you may have. But I want to give a special shout out to the Represent Women team. Thank you so much for all that you are doing. And we will kick it over to Cynthia.
Yeah, so I'm just so grateful to have these amazing presentations so you can see firsthand and hear from the amazing team all that they are doing. I think that we have some time for questions, and maybe I'll just talk about this slide given that it's up on the screen right now, and wanted to just say how appreciative we are to the support of Pivotal Ventures, who's really our longest term donor at this point. We started getting money in the 2019 cycle, which enabled me to pay myself a little bit of money, which was handy, and also to pay Courtney Lamandola, who was our first real team member. The support that we've gotten from Pivotal Ventures and other donors, of course, too, has really been transformative for us. It's helped us to do, I think, some really smart strategic planning to try to figure out how to use our skills in the most strategic way possible. It's enabled us to do some important capacity building with our staff to raise the opportunities for staff development, and which is so important, I think, from a human resources standpoint. This year, our budget will be 1.5 million or thereabouts. And we have a gap this year of about 500 million just to reach that that target amount that is our board approved budget. If we were able to raise another 200,000, so that's a total of 700,000, I think that we would focus those additional resources on really leaning into adding a measurement and evaluation consultant or staff member to help our team really understand the value of our work more clearly, measure the impact, to set goals that are both strategic and reasonable, but also that reflect the innovation that we want to bring to this work. Another thing that we're thinking of doing with that additional money that we hope to raise is to hire a development manager, and then, of course, to really think through the other kinds of capacity building tools that would help not only the staff as individuals thrive on the team, but also make our work that much more efficient. So things like access to systems that track legislation, and to the kinds of data visualization tools that we use for our communications and research work, and other things like language translation and accessibility for the disability community. All those things, I think, help us to reach a broader audience and bring this amazing team to a larger group of people who can help us make change happen in our lifetimes, because that's what we're all about. I will throw it over to Ashley now, who's doing a fabulous job moderating, and I think she'll open the floor for questions, and I'm happy to talk more about the financials if that's of interest to anybody on the call. Oh, but before I do, I just wanted to say we're so grateful for the support for Carla and for Emily and for the whole team at Pivotal Ventures, but also to the Democracy Fund. I believe there's somebody on the call from Democracy Fund, and to Crimson Bridge, and to just this cohort of women in this philanthropic space who have been supportive and engaged and really helped us to develop this strategy and the impact that we're able to have. So really heartfelt thanks to all of you.
All right. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And thank you so much, team, for sharing your incredible work today and all the great things that we're doing at Represent Women. I want to take time out to do a special shout out and send one to my department, the communications department. I want to thank Ariana and Ria, who are also managers in the department, for their production assistance on this call. And I just want to say that our department is just seamless and flows through all the other work that we do here at Represent Women. So we amplify our message, our research. We're on social media. We're creating innovative ideas. And of course, we are supporting calls like this. So thank you, Ariana, for sharing our links in the chat. And thank you, Ria, for sharing our slide presentation. I am humbled to work with a diverse group of brilliant women, all of them who are on this call. We will now open the floor for questions. And please feel free to ask Cynthia or any of our participants any questions that you may have. Thank you again. Do we have any questions? Also, feel free to put them in the chat if you would like.
Ashley, I see one in the chat right here.
I do. I was just about to ask. Okay. So let me see. I see one. It says, how does Kamala Harris's historic candidacy impact our organization? Cynthia, you want to take it away?
Sure. I'll start off, and then Ashley, I hope that you will complete my thoughts, as you so often do so well. I think for so many of us in the country, we're excited about the future and what can happen next. And I think so many of us are committed to that idea of innovating, trying new things, not just clinging to the status quo. And of course, the recent decision of President Biden to step down and throw his support toward Vice President Harris is just a great opening for us. It's a great model, perhaps the most public one I can remember in a generation, of somebody who is in power, who has a lot of power, opening the door and creating the room for a change and a change in leadership. And I think we've seen from the excitement, I think some of the team members, and I have been on some of these calls where people are getting mobilized. And I think it's so important to both acknowledge that for those of us who really care about women's leadership, we're excited specifically about a woman candidate running, of course, to lead this country, which is almost unprecedented. But I think we're also very excited about the other kinds of changes that can blossom and flourish as a result. And I think we're seeing new kinds of coalitions and partnerships and allegiances growing just in this last week and a half. I think that's very exciting. And I think it will only continue to open doors for amazing partnerships and programs. And Ashley, I'll throw it over to you to help fill in a little bit more about some of how our work might respond to it.
Oh, no, I think that, first of all, it's historic and it's very exciting. I think what Tori shared earlier, we're super excited about the Seneca Falls messaging and how things have changed, and we're relating what we're seeing now to that. We're also doing some messaging online about it. And I just think historically is something that's huge for what we're seeing. I think that it's great for our organization because we truly do believe in women's leadership and building that power. And so we're just super excited about it. We plan to create tons of messaging. We continue. Cynthia did an amazing op-ed, and it was marketed in Miss Magazine. We had Marv on KCBS talking about political, the barriers that her candidacy will break, just seeing her. And then we also had Cynthia talk to someone in Business Insider to also speak about, the economical impact and also just the overall political impact of her candidacy. So we're super excited about it, and we're messaging around it as well. Another question is, what are your top 3 pieces you want supporters to share widely, and especially in the next couple of months? We just dropped our, I will say, and then I can kick it over to anyone from the team who would like to add. But I want to say that we just released our GPI. So that is something that we're super excited about that we can message around. And we can also include as far as different types of reform that will increase women's political representation. And so we're excited. Our Seneca Falls messaging is coming in the fall and just amplifying women's representation. That is something else that we are excited about. We also have tons of research briefs. So whether it's CCR, the Black Women in Politics, which is timely, especially because this is something that we're seeing right now. And then our GPI. Anything else, Cynthia, that you would add to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think just off the top of my head, a few things I would say are that one of the great allies that we have is the Center for American Women in Politics, and they've been releasing data on the number of women candidates running and the fact that that has gone down in this election cycle from the previous 2 election cycles. And I think that's just a good reminder for those of us who believe in the value of women's leadership and the role that women can play in adding value to our democracy, that the current strategy that many people feel in the short run is so important, supporting individual women candidates is clearly an important one to do. But in order to have sustained improvement over time, we really need to support and expand our investment in these system strategies, which there are a lot of other examples of. I think the paying legislators a fair salary is an amazing example of what we need to do to keep women in office and retain them once elected. But I also think the voting rights work that Fatma and Courtney and Steph and other people in the research team do is so valuable. So I would say it's important to remember that while there are short-term opportunities for us to support candidates and support some of the pipeline strategies, that a perfect complement to those strategies are thinking more medium and long-term about building the kind of democracy we need and we yearn for. And that's only going to happen through some of these systems reforms. Oh, I'm sorry. I did think of another thing I think it's important to lift up is we're so committed here to building a democracy where all women who follow the rule of law have a seat at the table and have their voices heard. One particular constituency of women that has less and less representation is our Republican women, particularly in Congress and in state legislatures. So that's something that we've got some really important data on, I think, to track and to share and think through a strategy that engages center-right women as well, because I think we really need their voices at the table, along with all the other voices of younger voters and Democratic voters and et cetera, et cetera. So that's another thing that's on our mind.
Oh goodness, I was trying to mute. The next question that we're going to take, which races, local, state, or national, are you most excited to watch? I am going to kick it over to Marv and Steph to answer that question.
Thank you. Okay, so just overall, just to kind of piggyback off of the amazing knowledge that Cynthia was just sharing, the number of women running for the US House is down just in general. Like she said, the number of Republican women is down significantly. The underrepresentation is especially stark among Black Republican women. Overall, with all Republican women, it's just 17% of House candidates. So that is, something that we have to pay really close attention to. But to the races to watch, the top three races I'm really excited to watch at the congressional Senate races are Barbara Lee in California, Lisa Blunt, Rochester, and then also Angela Alsobrooks in Maryland. And I think Summer Lee in Pennsylvania is also really, really exciting. I think Jasmine Crockett in Texas, I'm from Texas. I'm very excited about her race, Nikema Williams, and of course, Ayanna Pressley is very interesting. And then another really great top 5 races to watch at state and local races for Black women, I would say Kimberly Jenkins, Mia McLeod, and Elaine O'Neill in North Carolina. So I would keep your eyes on those races this year. And I'll pass it over to Steph to add a bit more.
Thanks, Marv. Yeah, so thanks for highlighting those. At the local level, we're definitely looking at those coming RCV ranked choice voting races. So we already know that in Burlington, Vermont, back in March, they used ranked choice voting to elect its first woman and first LGBTQ plus mayor. And then we're also looking at Portland, Oregon, where the city council will be using proportional ranked choice voting. So multi-winner elections with ranked choice voting for mayor, auditor, and then the 12 city councilors are the ones that are using proportional ranked choice voting. We're also looking at a lot of races in California. We know already, thanks to early candidate filings, that Berkeley will have women running, and also Oakland. And then we'll be looking at San Francisco and other places in Oregon, as well as Portland, Maine. But we'll definitely be focusing on those races that have women, and we will be updating our ranked choice voting snapshots that look at the percentage of women in city councils and cities with mayors that are elected with ranked choice voting.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Katie. Can you speak a little bit more? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So in addition to following races, tracking outcomes for women, tracking outcomes for women of color, we also, of course, want to pay attention to those RCV ballot measures that I was mentioning earlier. So I put up my reference sheet. We have, it's a big year for RCV ballot measures. RCV is on the ballot in a lot of places for both statewide use and municipal level use. So we are watching Oregon closely, which has RCV on the ballot for statewide use, and it also has a local option there, which is very exciting. We're looking at Nevada, which has RCV on the ballot. It's a second round, and is actually a state constitutional amendment. So this is a very strong proposal. This is a strong, it could really, be a lasting positive impact for the state of Nevada. It was passed before, and because it's a state constitutional amendment, it has to pass again. So this is round 2. So all eyes on Nevada as well. We're also looking at Idaho, that has a statewide ballot measure for following the Alaska model. If you're familiar with that, the use of ranked choice voting plus open primaries. And then Colorado is working on RCV as well. So we're in another big one. There's a lot, guys. Another big one is in Alaska. So Alaska is interesting because, they used ranked choice voting in their most recent elections, and it was a huge success. We've seen and again, it's the final 5, the way that more women ran in that after ranked choice voting was passed, and then the 5 previous election cycles combined just really blew the door open for more women to run and win. We see different political ideologies represented across the political spectrum. It's just super successful. So surprise, surprise, there are some individuals that aren't happy about that, or some people who aren't happy about that. So there's a repeal effort on the ballot this year. So we're all out there kind of trying to combat the repeal effort. And then it's also on the ballot in several cities. So if you're curious to learn more, just let me know, and we can share all the information we have. It's on the ballot in cities in California, Colorado. It's on the ballot in Washington, D.C. If you're based in Washington, D.C., Follow the Issue 83 campaign, also several cities in Illinois, Minnesota. So if you're there, or if that's one of your target states, definitely get involved, reach out and let us know how we can get you plugged in.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. And our last question is, what is the rationale behind the GPI scoring and what constitutes a successful score for a state? I'm going to pass that over to Courtney. Thank you.
Thank you, Ria. And actually, can you flip forward one more slide? I find visuals help with this. So when I talk about the Gender Parity Index and the ideal score, since states do earn scores between 0 if there are no women in any elected office and 100 if women were to hold every single elected office. The ideal state is parity, which would be 50 out of 100, and those states earn an A. So those are the states that we pay the most attention to, closely followed by states that are safely within the B range, which is anywhere between 33 out of 100 and just shy of parity. Within that range, we have states that are within 10 points of parity, and anywhere between the mid B range to an A are our biggest and best success stories for the states. Part of the reason why I direct most of our attention to the Bs and the As is because what tends to happen between the C and the D states is they often shift places, and progress has been made within those states, but it's relatively minimal progress. Or in some cases, because of the way that the scores are set up, they might reflect a handful of women just in Congress or a few statewide executives, but representation might be very poor in state legislatures or vice versa. Whereas for the B states and above, we know that there has been progress at multiple levels of office, which is why most of our attention is drawn to those states.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And thank you all for answering all of the questions. And thank you for the attendees who answered all of the great questions. We're going to leave it where it is. We thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for attending the call. Thank you, team, again, for sharing all of your expertise and all the great work that we're doing. If you have any questions, please, Ria, can you pull up how to get in touch with us? Yes, please follow us on all social media platforms. You can visit our website. There were plenty of links that were in the chat, so please save them for future reference. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you. Have a good afternoon.